Hello, and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel, and my guest today, who is Marianne Bentzen, and she is a psychotherapy trainer. Hello, Marianne.
Hi, Anna.
Um, Now, your book, which I am enjoying, is called Neuroaffective Meditation. So that's an intriguing combination. So tell us what that is.
What it means, probably. Yeah. Well, I think meditation doesn't necessarily require an introduction. Most people have a sense of what that is. Neuroaffective is more difficult. It's I guess it springs out of my colleague Susan's and my experiences back in the 60s and 70s, when all the research done on the brain was also neurocognitive. And then there were a couple of brave souls, mainly one researcher named Jaak Panksepp, who said it's not possible that it should be so difficult to research emotions and the brain. And so he started doing that and called that affective neuroscience. And so when we started looking at child development in the 90s, we looked at how does the brain actually develop from birth and up to death, basically. And also, how does psychology develop in the same lifespan, basically. And what we found was that the easiest way to describe that was to call it neuroaffective instead of calling it affective neuroscience, because it wasn't. It was neuroaffective psychology. And from that came a concept of what are we doing when we're doing psychotherapy? Well, we're working with neuroaffective psychotherapy, which looks at the differences between working with people that have either never developed or they've lost their sense of feelings, of emotions, or we're working with people who have tons of feelings and emotions, but they don't have very much self-control. Or we have people who have so much self-control they can, barely do anything because they're always controlling themselves or always doing 10 times more than they can handle. Or people that aren't able to deepen or really get a more delicate understanding of themselves and other people, which is kind of the last aspect. So that would be the condensed version of the huge field of neuroaffective psychology.
So where does meditation come in?
Well, it comes in depending on what you want to do. So mainly, I think if you're talking about meditation as sitting down and turning your attention either to quieting your mind or to opening yourself to a sense of deeper love to larger areas of the world, then we're working with the higher ranges of psychological development. And that's a beautiful and very enriching thing to do. And it's also something that doesn't make sense to everybody because it's not the place that a lot of people actually really need to work, which is part of what the book is about.
Yes, I actually was very happy to see that being addressed. So there are very positive aspects to, and this is not about meditation, it's how the practice is approached. So if it's approached to cultivate, as you say, certain abilities, then that's great. But we get into little pitfalls, don't we? Tell us a little bit about the pitfalls.
Pitfalls. Yeah. Well, there's the meditation is going to save my life pitfall, which can be true. It can be true that you wander around and without meditation, it's like nothing really makes sense. Nothing has depth. Nothing has beauty. And on the other hand, when you're in such a state, there's also something else that you need to learn, because there's obviously something that you have not learned to open relative to the world and relative to other people. And meditation will not teach you that. There's this old Peanuts joke that I read many, many years ago and that I adore, which is when Thomas says, I love humanity. It's people I can't stand, and it's a common one in some areas of the meditative approach, that you can't stand people, so you can go off and meditate and feel how beautiful that is, and how much humanity, how important humanity is, and how beautiful the world is. And then you go back and you meet people, and it's like, yeah. So we have to deal with people. It's not enough to deal with humanity. And we have to deal also with the people that we have trouble with and that we don't like.
And that's the whole point of engaging in a more spiritual practice, because it's meant to enrich us and help us to engage with the world, not disengage from it. And there's a very important distinction to be made there.
I think that different traditions have different views of what meditation is for, but I think that there's a woman who has studied this her whole life, and she says basically that every authentic spiritual tradition has the approach of compassion as a core element of it. And I think that's true, that is highly central in all parts of meditative practice. Yeah.
I think that's right. I think that compassion has to be the quality, because without it, well, we can see what happens when there is no compassion. There was a quote in your book, which I really enjoyed: grow up, wake up, clean up. So tell us what you mean.
Well, it's all about, in a way, it's about maturity. The first part, growing up, is about maturity, and having the maturity, which really goes all the way to a sense of wisdom, the approach of wisdom. And what is wisdom? Well, the wisdom is both the capacity to engage with compassion in what other people are feeling and doing, but it's also and also the capacity to do that with yourself, and also the capacity to do that with animals, and with technically these days also with plants. So there's this whole sense of the living world to have compassion and insight in that. And the other part of it is to also have the dispassion to look at it and just observe it. I forgot your question. Please repeat it.
I was asking you about this wonderful quote.
Yeah. Grow up, yeah. So that was growing up.
Yeah.
And waking up is about the meditative approach. There's a one tradition which says that waking up is about the realizing the sense of the impermanence of the world, which is not something that, you can look at impermanence and you can say, well, this piece of paper here isn't going to last, it's going to die. It will be a dead paper in a little while, and I will be a dead person in a little while. And that's one aspect of it. But another aspect of it is that everything is also impermanent right now. It's dying right now. It's coming apart right now. And other things are growing right now. So there's this amazing movement in the world all the time. So that's the wake up part. In the deeper awakening practices, which very few people get to, we're also talking about accessing a sense that I also do not access, but that I hear my teacher talk about, which is the sense of where we are not separate, where we are one being, or one, not even a being, but a one presence, perhaps. And so that's wake up. That's the other aspect of wake up. The third one, which is clean up, has to do with basically cleaning up your messes. So in that sense, it's part of growing up. It's cleaning up your relationships, and cleaning up your self-conceit, and cleaning up your depressions, and cleaning up your bad diet, and cleaning up your house and your garden and whatever. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing, isn't it? Because in order to do that, you have to be truly awake, which means you have to be awake to the consequences of what you do, and be willing to engage with that and do your best, rather than disengage or be less responsible, perhaps, shall we say?
I think that in a certain sense, when you do something, it's always a step into the unknown. And so when you say you have to take responsibility for it, yes, the responsibility is to stay with the unknown, to stay with that we don't know what the consequences may be or will be, but that there's a you might say a silent promise inside of us to stay with that experience and to stay with what comes out of it, and to try to bring beauty or learning out of that.
Yes. And you've talked about, actually, this theme pretty much sums up your book, which is really the definition of what it is to be mature. And so maybe it might be nice for you to give us a little summary of what it is to be an emotionally mature individual.
Yeah, well, it's for one thing, it's different in different cultures, because culture has a huge impact on us from before we're born. But excuse me, the way that I usually distinguish it is that I separate it into three different parts. It was something that I was very engaged in when I was learning to do psychotherapy back in the late 70s and early 80s. And what is it to be mature? What is it? What are we looking for? Because psychotherapy has to be looking for something more than enjoying the next piece of chocolate or the next boyfriend or girlfriend. So what we found is that you have the nervous system can mature at three different levels. The first level is the level of the autonomic nervous system. So you get the maturation that is capable of handling traumatic experience. And this ability to handle traumatic experience and stressful experiences is a very strong indicator of the autonomic nervous system. It also means that you're able to eat when you need to, and not because you feel like it, that you go to bed when you need to, and that you can go to sleep when you do it, wake up when you need to. So those are rhythms, biorhythms. That would be a short version of the autonomic nervous system. The limbic system is basically mature, you might say, if I can do a very quick version of it, when you have a secure attachment pattern. And what does that mean? It means that you're able to attune emotionally with another human being, that you notice when things start going off attunement, and that you're capable of reattuning again and trusting again that it's possible to reattune. And at the mental level, that you have self-control, that you have willpower to do the things that you need to do, but also that you have some of this wisdom aspect, the mentalization aspect, the ability to have insight in other people and in yourself, and kindness, compassion with that. So that would be a short gallop.
And many of us teeter backwards and forwards along the spectrum of maturity in all areas. Yes.
Yeah.
So what do you feel that meditation can bring to help move in that direction of maturity?
I think that I think it's different for different people, but I think that some of the main things that I've seen meditation do is bring us into a much deeper contact with the wordless parts of ourselves. So there's this concept of to stop thinking, which I don't, it doesn't happen in my life, but it happens in some people's lives. So it has happened occasionally, but just not very often. but what I see is that whether you're thinking or not thinking, your awareness of the nonverbal world becomes much clearer and much deeper and much more detailed. And as that happens, you also start to realize that that you are part of it. You start to become part of it, or you start to realize that you have been part of it all along. That you emerged out of this planet like a leaf emerges out of a tree in a month or so. Yeah. And also that you will dissolve back into it again. So there's this sense of not just living on the world, which we don't do, but living in the world, which we do. And I think that's actually essential. And the reason I think it's essential is that most people seem to have lost it. We have gone into computers, we have gone into microphones, we have gone into houses with electric lighting, we have gone away from being part of the world. And I think that's a pity for the world and a pity for us.
Agreed. Absolutely. You talk about being able to be in a non-verbal world. What do you mean by that?
Well, most of our consciousness is actually nonverbal. So the autonomic nervous system is nonverbal. The limbic system is nonverbal. Most of the prefrontal cortex, which is the final part of the brain, is also nonverbal, or is verbally not very competent, would be perhaps more accurate. So most of the inner experiences that we can have are in fact nonverbal. Your emotions, when they show up seemingly more or less out of nowhere. Sometimes you know what made it happen, but very often we don't know what made the feeling happen. It's just that there's this feeling. And so it comes out of the unconscious and it emerges without words. And then we try to put words to it, which is kind of like standing in a different part of ourselves and trying to describe it over there, which is, usually not the most effective thing you can do with it. The most effective thing you can do with it is to follow it, and you can follow it non-verbally. If you notice what you're feeling right now, for instance, just noticing the feeling, and then noticing also your breathing and the sense of your breath. And as we both do that, we can see how close are the breath and the feeling, how close are they to each other, and see if it's possible to let the breath either very gently touch the feeling or to be inside the feeling, to go inside the feeling, to kind of stream through the feeling. Those are some of the things you can play with without words.
Exactly. And I think actually linking it to breath is so powerful, isn't it? Because breath can help us deal with all sorts of things. It calms us down when we're hyper. It calms us down when we're panicking. It calms us down when we're in pain as well. As a hypnotherapist, of course, it's one of the things that I do is help people to manage pain. And one of the key starters to that is breath. And it's something that I teach people a lot. So it's a very powerful thing to do. And as you say, it's nonverbal. And it's important that we deal with the nonverbal because that's basically what we are, is nonverbal.
Yeah.
We become verbal in order to find a means of expressing the nonverbal.
Yeah.
Eventually. Okay, so that's clear. What else, or why do you feel that it's important to do this in order to help us to acquire that desired maturity?
I don't know that it always is. I think it depends on where you are in your maturation process. I think that some people, including some people that have meditated for a very long time, in terms of developing maturity, I think they need to deepen into their understanding of relationship. I think that some people need to deepen into their understanding of what the world needs of us all. I think that some people use meditation, as they sometimes use psychotherapy, to kind of go into themselves and shut the door. And I don't think that's what it's for. So, yeah.
And that's very clear, because we are all aware of, let's say, people who should know better in spiritual circles behaving badly.
Oh, yeah.
And we feel they should know better because we look to them as having a higher wisdom, but they're actually turning out to have clay feet just like everybody else. And that's very true. Just working with different spiritual organizations, sometimes you realize you've just walked into a nest of vipers and you think, oh, I didn't expect that here.
I think that's one of the problems we have largely in the West, is that we have, in a way, deified spiritual teachers and spiritual communities. And I mean, people are a mess, and spiritual people are also a mess. It's with some of them, that's one of the reasons they became spiritual people. It was because they felt that everything was such a mess that the only thing they could do was to sit and meditate. So there's a lot of messiness, but there's not more messiness than there is in your average football club or cooking class. It's the same mess. It's people are messy.
And I think this is the thing, is that we have to make a distinction between those who acquire a cloak of spirituality and then the spirituality that is something that's there inside your heart, which you follow regardless of whether you belong to a recognized practice of one kind or another. Mm-hmm. That's a very different thing. And this is what we're talking about is a maturity that is evident in the way in which we engage with the world and with other people. Mm-hmm. And that's the core. Yeah. And so the core of that is, as we were saying earlier, compassion. And also from compassion stems non-judgment, a desire to understand. Mm-hmm. And it's all wrapped up in that. And once you've got that, then that's a kind of maturity, mm-hmm. which we would all do benefit from, I think.
Yeah. And I also think that we all lose it sometimes. It's a deep skill and a high skill, and sometimes we lose it for a while, and something else is happening. Grief or anger is happening, and then we can return to it afterwards. So
of course, because when we're in pain and in fear, it's very difficult to have that level of detachment, to be able to step back and think, okay, what's really happening here?
Yeah.
So what are your tips for people who would like to work on this?
What are my tips? Well, I guess that if you want to start meditating or try meditating, then one tip is to look around for a really good teacher. And how do you find a really good teacher? That's a good question. I think that you can basically taste a really good teacher. There's a sense of, you go there and it gives you something. So there's a certain aspect of looking for a teacher, which is kind of a little bit like shopping. You need to try out different things. Try 2 or 3 different teachers and see which one you like, and what is it that you like. Give yourself some time to find out what you like. And then at some point in time, you need to commit. Just as you do with any other skill building, you have to decide whether you're going to spend a lot of your time drawing, or whether you're going to spend a lot of your time singing. It's not the same thing, but you can reach excellence in both. You need to find out the same thing with meditation. There are many different kinds of meditation. It's one of these things that has evolved spontaneously all over the world. So find the thing that speaks to you. Somehow I seem to have dropped into Tibetan Buddhism without quite meaning to, but that's sort of how it went with Christianity, which is what it is. But my husband is very interested in, or very moved by, Zen Buddhism, and those two are close, but they're definitely not identical. So it's just an interesting to see how they speak together, these two approaches. So that's sort of the meditative aspect. Another thing that I think you need to look at is, what is it that you get out of it? In a certain sense, what meditation does is it will allow you, it will offer you a completely new sense of what it is to be alive. And that's a beautiful thing. If you're doing it to get away from pesky human beings, you might want to work a bit more on your sense of what pesky human beings are doing and why they're so pesky to you. If you're doing it and that would be more a psychotherapeutic process, where you need to do the same thing. You need to try different things and see what works for you. So it's worth noting that even very powerful meditative practices will not help you solve deep personal problems. For that, psychotherapy is excellent, and meditation is not. So on the other hand, once you reach the end of a sense of what psychotherapy does for you, when you start to meditate, you realize that in moments the story falls away, and what's there is the ability to breathe and the sense of what the world is doing, as you, in a way, sing your own song of aliveness. The world is also singing its song of aliveness.
I love that. And I think there is no better place to end than on such a beautiful, poetic statement. So I want to thank you very much, Marianne, for your time today.
Thank you so much, Anna. It was a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for doing this in the world that you're doing.
Thank you. And the book that we are discussing is Neuroaffective Meditation. And I shall put a link to that in the description box. Marianne, if people wanted to find out more about your work, how can they do that?
They can go to my website. And I actually have a couple of meditation workshops this year that are available. My website is Marianne Bentzen. So Marianne, it's on the book, of course, the book cover, Marianne Bentzen, Bentzen, and it's just one word and then .com. So that's where I'm findable. One workshop I think is in June, and it's meditation. It has a German translation, the workshop, and in October I'm doing one in Corfu, which is just in English, and they're both announced on the website.
Well, I shall be putting a link to your website also on the description box. And thank you very much.
Thank you so much for this lovely conversation. Thank you and best of luck.
Thank you all for watching, and I wish you a great week. And if you are experiencing the beginning of spring, do go out, enjoy it, make the most of it. Until next time, goodbye.